Hello, my friends, and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. For the ones who read the dystopian novel 1984 written by George Orwell, they know exactly what I will be talking about, and that is the perpetual war. So, in that fantastic, visionary, genius book, the author talks about a perpetual war between two sides. Now, the war was going on forever, and it seemed like it was not going to end ever. It was a perpetual war because the war was used to take care of the population. Having a threat always there, you would make them do whatever you want. That is, if you don't do this, you support the enemy. Therefore, you will be shamed, possibly incarcerated, and negative consequences could occur to you. Now, perpetual war, obviously, it has its profiteers, big-time profiteers, financial sector, military industrial complex sector, and resources that you build, weapons, right, bombs, missiles, and so on. So you have at least three big profiteers. We are there. Why? Because we have this, I think he's a no good. I put it euphemistically, nicely. This is the best term I could have come for. I think his name is Boris Pistorius, I think his name is. He's the defense minister of the used to be great country of Germany. Because he comes and tells all the guys in Europe that Europe must arm itself for a possible, war with someone else. Who could that be? That's the designated boogeyman, designated by Al Capone as a boogeyman, Russia. Everything was just fine until these guys intervened and say, you know what, there's a problem in Ukraine, and the Russians, you gotta fight the Russians because they're the bad dudes. Therefore, you gotta shoot yourselves in the foot with what? With sanctions. So let me show you this little article coming from the New Voice of Ukraine. And this is what this guy says. But you have to look, through this garbage. Why? You know how the dynamics, what the dynamics are. So here it is, the New Voice of Ukraine. December 16th, 2023. Europe must rearm, like it's not armed already, as new threats loom. Who do you think the threats are? German defense minister says, this guy right here, since he was appointed as a bureaucrat, pushed, promoted by some interests, and I mentioned some, this guy was all for this, for the military-industrial complex of United States of America, not Germany, because he's screwing Germany, actually. New military threats could emerge, okay, a lot of things could happen, but anyway, by the end of the decade, and Europe must race to ensure it can better defend itself. So you see, from a could, something that you don't know if it's going to happen, you must. So it's like I tell you, I don't know, you must do this thing because this could happen when you go to the store. Why? Or don't go to the store at all because this could happen. You must stay home. This could happen. I mean, if you do this, you have no life, no country, no community, no nothing. How do you think these explorers did what they did? With could? Yeah, and they went on and said, oh, you know what, we got to be prepared. I'm not saying anything that against being prepared. You should be prepared. But the point is, okay, is there a realistic threat? And if you say yes, bring me the evidence. If you give me Ukraine as the evidence, because it's clear who the threat is, right? If you give me Ukraine, I mean, really? Okay, why? Oh, it invaded. Why did it invade? All you need to know is unprovoked. They're not going to mention the coup d'etat. They're not going to mention the NATO expansion into next to the border of Russia. They will not mention what these guys in Kiev did, the guys who took over through a bloody illegal coup. What did they do to the Russian population? They're not going to mention that. They're not going to mention Pistorius. They're not going to mention the Minsk I and Minsk II agreements, where the Germans were one of the three Western guarantors that Ukraine will implement the Minsk agreements. The other ones were France and Poland. not United States of America and Great Britain, because they were working hard at something else. So these guys were the facade, keeping the Russians, ooh, the Russians were, I would say, naive. And then in the meantime, the Americans and the Brits were arming and training the Ukrainians for what, I wonder? They had no intention of implementing Minsk agreements or anything like that. They were preparing for this. So when you say it's unprovoked, well, that means ignoring about 98% of why the war started in Ukraine. It started after 1991. That's when it started. When those guys promised no inch eastward. Remember James Baker, the Secretary of State of the United States of America? No inch eastward. Believe me, that's a gentleman understanding, right? A gentleman, whatever. Nah, the gentleman was not a gentleman. The Soviets were more, the communists were more gentlemen than these guys. If you tell me they didn't have a choice, they have nuclear weapons, the choice would have been, fuck you, give us what we want. Blackmail. But they didn't. Because there were many things happening over there. There were many traitors over there. They just switched hats. Pop, pop. So let's see what else these guys are saying here. So must race to ensure it can better defend itself, German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius told Reuters. Russia has already they named the threats, plural threats, has significantly increased arms production to support its invasion of Ukraine. Really? How? $80 billion? From 60 some to 80? And United States from what? From 760 a few years ago to $886 billion? What are you talking about? Yeah, but these guys are the forces of good, and they just intervene when they have to help and bring democracy and freedom. Such garbage. While also threatening the Baltic states, Georgia and Moldova. Moldova and Georgia are not in the European Union, and if you try to get into Georgia, yes, Russia. Again, did you look over a map? Do you think that these guys are just spreading democracy because they're good people? I mean, this is a kindergarten level infantile mentality. If you think that the West expands because they're just good people trying to help and they want peace and that's it, if you think that's and I'm including Al Capone as well, do you think that that's the goal? I don't fucking know. You're kindergarten level. That's what I think. Because that's the way it is. Because you don't take into consideration many aspects, determining aspects, reasons why certain things occur. If you still think that Iraq was invaded to bring freedom and democracy because we somehow considered that in that household we need to change everything, then I don't know. I'm going to give you a pacifier, put it in your mouth and go over there and sit down in front of the stupid cartoons that are nowadays. Garbage cartoons. Again, Georgia and Moldova, Baltic states. Baltic states were the big talkers. Altogether, the population of the three countries, Baltic states, Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania, is 6.1 million people. 6.1, three countries. So when you hear the Baltic states, you think of a city. A city challenging the bear. 145 million people with nuclear weapons, the biggest landmass as a country and so on. What the hell? But they are just the guys who tries to instigate garbage. Why? Because Al Capone is over there. If Al Capone will be, how should I put it? But you can't, because if you don't have Al Capone, a lot of countries will become decent overnight, like Canada will become decent. Was not going to challenge China across the Pacific Ocean because it has interests over there. What are you talking about? 40 million people, out of which I think 10 million people are foreigners? What kind of cohesion do you think you have? How many spies do you think you have? And how many people will fight for their own countries against Canada? The same thing. Look what's going on in Europe. The same thing. Too many, and they have allegiance for other countries outside. And some that are really born here have allegiance for one particular country somewhere else. All right, let's move on. The United States is likely to reduce its military involvement in Europe. Yeah, it passes the garbage to you guys, and you're going to have a headache as it shifts focus to Indo-Pacific. So these guys United States are spreading democracy and freedom everywhere. And if you look behind, what do they leave? Tell me all the countries where they intervened with these weasel, plantation workers that they have, the vassal states from Europe. Tell me wherever they intervened if things are better. In Yugoslavia? Look what's going on over there. Yugoslavia is isolated. They got Kosovo. And it's already ready to. And look how corrupt people in Kosovo. I have information that actually in Kosovo, it's a big money laundering scheme for big interests. And not only, organized crime is rampant over there. Kosovo is not as far as I heard, functional country. It's a mafia state like Romania. I think it's getting towards. It's a different kind. When you think about mafia, don't think about the 1930s Chicago or 1920s Chicago. Not like that. Wars, because they don't do it with that necessarily. They do it with threats, blackmail, and if they get to that point, they do it. Don't worry. And you have a little accident. That's a different story. So United States right now, you take Iraq, Syria, where? Libya, Afghanistan, all these locations. And now Gaza and Israel. I know it's not US's fault whatsoever, but somehow United States was involved, was in charge of the Middle East for the past 30 years. Sole leader. 30 years. And this is the result. So much peace over there and love. How come? Maybe they don't want that. No. Divide and conquer. Divide and conquer. That's what they do. And now, after he leaves this garbage in Europe, for the idiots in Europe to take care of it and screw their economy and switch to a war economy, paying their donors, who's going to produce? Who's going to produce? The American companies. And one company in Germany, Rheinmetall, and probably one in France. And then little ones will get the crumbs. Then you're going to deal with the Russians. Good job. You were friends with the Russians, but hey, they invaded Ukraine. You got to react because Al Capone told you so. But Al Capone had nothing to do with Ukraine in 2013, 14, whatsoever. I promise. And now after they did this garbage in Israel area, they're after Iran over there. The things in the Balkans are not solved whatsoever. I'm waiting for something to happen over there any moment now. Now they switch to where? They go to East Asia. They want China in. So these are the spreaders of what? Of peace or of war? Well, I know that's not their fault whatsoever in any example I gave you. And I'm quoting, we Europeans, hey, garbage, don't lump everybody in your garbage, must engage more to, it's like they have a community. No, it is not community. It's Brussels telling everybody else how to behave, what to do, how to change their culture and history. No, and have a worldview. Must engage more to ensure security on our continent. Yeah, who shook it? Russia, said Pistorius, noting, however, that it would take time for the region to increase its own armed productions. Okay, yeah. Profiteers are always going to be there. We have about 5 to 8 years, he says, to catch up in terms of armed forces, industry, and society. There you go. Work on about that. You're going to have perpetual war. Europe is also aware that the whole Europe is aware that it may have to compensate for US aid to Ukraine if Washington does not agree to new funding. Why? Why Europe? I mean, whenever we act in our lives, we act in our benefit. I mean, if we act against our interests, then how do you call that? So whenever I do something, I do it to benefit me. Well, if I help someone, I also benefit me because I feel better about myself. All right, so that's why for me altruism is kind of like tricky. When you see these guys, I'm going to help you. Actually, you trigger some little hormones in your brain. Oh my God, hormones, whatever. I'm not going to go with chemicals now. And it's just a pleasure. You feel better about yourself helping. Why do you think these guys, when you have depression, they ask you to go to the Humane Society and take care of dogs, do some community services, help people, because that makes you feel better about yourself, which is true. That's good. But you still do it for yourself through the action, and the other person profits out of your pleasure of serving yourself. That's why when you come here in United States of America, not that's why, but some of these guys feel better helping you until you prove that you're not a baboon. If you just came with a boat over the Atlantic Ocean, they think you're a baboon. So they help you, and when they realize that, wait a minute, this guy is different, they drop you like a hot potato. Why? Because they're feeling good God-like mentality helping the poor baboon from Romania, for instance, crumbles. So there's no interest. They don't want to help you anymore. There's no pleasure because you are not the baboon they thought you were. And they can't play God and pure human, poor human. I mean, anyway, let's go back here. These guys are going to have the election of the more pro-European government in Poland should not allow the Weimar Triangle of Berlin. Weimar was garbage, just so you know. Weimar Republic, these guys are hailing as, oh my God, it was garbage, prostitution and corruption. And some people, a group of people, were very, very influential and were having Germany by the balls. Read about it. Yeah, that's exactly how it happened. And then that triggered what? That guy. All right, the election of the more pro-European in a triangle of Berlin, Paris, and Warsaw. Well, how about Hungary? How about the Netherlands? How about Slovakia? Just to mention a few. No? Okay, there's no triangle over there. To further develop their military cooperation, we need to figure out how best to set ourselves up on the eastern flank on the basis of the NATO defense plans. So the Russians were right. You guys have bad intentions. I mean, if you move towards me all the time with military infrastructure, what am I supposed to think? That you're the good guy and you invade and you attack whomever doesn't agree with you? What if I don't agree with you in the future? What will you do to me? Too late, I got the weapons right here, a minute away from Moscow. That's all it is for a missile to fly from the northeastern border of Ukraine to Russia to get Moscow, for instance. A minute and a half, 2 minutes. Why? Because this is the territory these guys just covered without a fire shot. Smart? Yeah, but they promised something. Well, promises. You have anything in writing? No, doesn't count. That's what the Americans told the Russians when they say, wait a minute, in 1991, 1994, you promised this. Do you have anything in writing? No. Beat it, man. Beat it. All right. Well, who were the naive ones? The Russians, the Soviets, how you want to call it. It's not the same thing. But, you know, remember when when USSR collapsed, it was a determination made from inside, not from outside. Outside always want to destroy them, and vice versa. But the guys from inside, oh, they collapsed. It was like a collapse. It was a multitude of events that triggered that. And it was also a decision by some to say, you know what, let's move this way. Without that one, probably they would have been in a different form, still Soviet Union there. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that these guys are getting ready to a perpetual war. And we're going to have the profiteers, as I mentioned, 3. These are the 3 branches. The military, right, or the arms manufacturing companies. They have the finance, the ones with the money, lending you some numbers, creating then inflation, right? And then, what's the third one? The energy sector. The ones they're going to need this material, that energy to create the bombs and airplanes and all that. And you're going to have some politicians who are going to be paid by these guys legally by campaign donation, and then you're gonna pay back, right? You're gonna work for them. This is democracy. Thank you. I mean, nowadays. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.